Welcome, everyone, to Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'm your host, Christine Courtney. Our goal here is to give you some actionable takeaways that will help you lead your teams. Thanks for joining us on this leadership journey. Let's get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'm your host, Christine Courtney, and so happy to have in the studio with me today my dear my dear colleague of times of yore, Amanda Meeson, and also a dear friend. But just so you guys can get a sense of who Amanda is that she is the executive director of the Sterling Community Center, which serves 10,000 individuals and families in Stratford and the greater Bridgeport region in Connecticut. Sterling creates impactful and inclusive programs that engage and cultivate a thriving audience. So think about it. They have athletics, arts, preschool, after school, summer camp, community service, food security programs, enrichment, and then so much more. But since joining their team in 2016, Amanda has led the organization through $10 million in capital improvements, multiple technology and infrastructure advancements, while both tripling revenue growth and impact. Before that, not to be forgotten, Amanda was the VP of programming at our company. And I'm super proud of her because she received the Bridgeport Regional Business Council's Rising Star Award, the Fairfield County Businesses Journal's 40 Under 40 Award in 2019, and the Women We Admire Top 50 Nonprofit Leaders in the U.S. So congratulations, Amanda. And it's so good to have you.
I feel the same way, Christine Courtney. Thank you for having me.
I knew I had to get Amanda because we are doing this series on communication and different leaders in different industries and their takes on communication, because probably the biggest thing that I find wherever I go in my own business, but also in other people's businesses, when I'm in other people's business, everybody's concerned about how can we get better at communication. And if there's problems, it almost always comes down to communication. And so young people in business or people who've been around for a long time still say, how can we get better at this? So I invite different voices, and Amanda's a great one because she, in my experience of her, when she was a leader in our business, she was always a really fantastic communicator. And I would say probably up there in one of her top strengths, as there were many. Anyway, let's dig right in. You ready, Amanda?
I'm ready. Bring it on.
Okay. So let's first talk about kind of building trust, which I think is such formative in terms of communication. But how do you think leaders communicate in a way that can build trust and maybe credibility as well? Like what helps? What can help?
Yeah, I think for me, that is always authenticity, being who you are truly in every interaction. If you can get through it. I think that is also can be really exhausting depending on the type of person you are. It's very natural for me to be authentic and come in as my natural state. And so it's always been something really intuitive. I think the issue with this is that you just absolutely cannot fake it. Humans are smart and emotional. And so it has to be something that you have in your body and that you believe in as well for that to work. I think too, the role modeling of that, when people see that you're consistently authentic and that you're comfortable embodying what you're asking them to do as well. And that might be leading by example, but I think that they're watching and want to know that you mean what you say.
Yeah. And I think in my experience of you as a leader, you're pretty much the kind of woman that's like, I'm going to tell you if I've got an issue. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like every time I felt pretty confident that you weren't talking behind my back. I was Amanda's boss, but, I've kind of felt like I knew you would come to me if you felt like you needed to.
Yes, absolutely.
And I bet the people that work for you feel the same.
I even remember, this is early days for me. So I think I had just been promoted to kind of maybe a program manager role. And I was very overwhelmed and very self-absorbed. And I had a really tough school year. And I remember sitting with you. I don't know if you remember this moment. It was transformative for me. And I said, this is hard and stressful. And you've given me too much. And I did this and this and this and this. And aren't you lucky I did all those things for this company? And this is how I remember it. I'm sure I was hopefully more graceful in that moment. And you said, you let me fully vent. I might've been crying. There might've been tears, which was probable. And you said, well, shame on you. That's what you said to me. Shame on you for not, I know, for not bringing me in earlier, for not communicating what you needed so that I could be part of the solution. And I remember that so vividly, of just your ability to open up and say, I can help solve these problems with you, but I can't help if I don't know where you stand. And so I think that volley, as leaders and as in that moment, me wanting to share with you, what I needed from my boss is so important on both ends. And now I'm just addicted to communication, right? So we just hired 3 new people, which has been awesome. And there are questions in the interview where I say, very much our culture is a place where we normalize feedback. We are highly collaborative. That is up, down, and sideways. And tell us how you would fit into that environment. And if those answers are not confidence telling in terms of their ability to welcome that type of environment, to thrive in that type of environment, it typically won't go further. And so we try to get it right when we're sharing the expectations of how we're going to work together.
Yeah, I love it. That is a great.
Now, do you remember this moment?
I don't remember my reaction. I remember your moment, right? But I sound much harsher than I remember me being, but clearly it was what was needed.
Listen,
but
I'm being dramatic.
I hope it was helpful. Well, clearly somehow it's helpful if it's lasted in your mind this long. But I think that's a great tip, what you just gave people, because it's much easier to start with over communicating what you feel like is maybe too much communication than it is to then make up for it later. Because if you are very hands off in the beginning, then you start communicating, they start worrying, like, what the heck is happening? Because you're setting a norm early on. And also people are really open in the beginning. We talk about it all the time with the enthusiastic beginner, right? They're excited in the beginning. That's the time to really get them some real clear norms on, like, this is how we communicate here. So I love that you're putting that out right away. Are there any other strategies in terms of how you make sure that you ensure clarity? Because I think one of the problems that I always have is that in my mind, it's really clear what needs to be done because I'm thinking about it all the time. But then I expect them maybe to hear it 1 or 2 times and have a real clear understanding of what I mean or what the problem is or what our goal is. Anything you use to make sure?
Yeah, there was a podcast. You guys, I forget which podcast it was, but you were all talking about younger staff being invited, younger/newer staff being invited to kind of corporate events or settings that you as the CEO and president feel are very important, right? And that importance or the reasoning behind that might not be felt at every level. And that was telling for me too, because I think I have really good intentions. I communicate often. And so I make a lot of assumptions that they are receiving the message as I intend for it to be. And that's just not true, right? At the pace that we're moving, at the amount, here at Sterling, we have about 20 full-time staff and then another 35 that come in the summer. And 20 feels so intimate and amazing, especially compared to coming from you. And yet it's still absolutely challenging because there's just barriers to connecting in that way. And so I think the tip I would say is just to always make time. It is easy to get caught up in the inbox. It's easy to get caught up behind the desk or in meetings, and being really intentional about setting aside time every single week or a day or whatever dosage feels right for you to, genuinely connect with those that report to you and those that also don't. So I'll give you another example of this new group that came in on a team of 20. Onboarding 3 new people at the same time has been nice because we've been able to be extra strategic in doing so. And the first week was super hectic and lots going on here. And my intention was to sit with each one of them. They don't all report to me, but that I wanted to see how their first week went. And I had no business actually making time for that. But then in each meeting, right, I was able to say, how was your first week? What are we doing well? Are you learning? Are there things that we're doing that are effective for you as you absorb who we are? And each one was, 10 to 15 minutes long. And I was able to set up those supervisors and that next week of onboarding with so much more intention and clarity. And so always make the time is what I would say. Always make the time. It's so priceless in the payoff that you will get in terms of those relationships.
Yeah, I love that you shared that because I think often as leaders, we know okay, we need to meet with our direct reports and we need to set aside time for maybe one-on-ones with them. But then underneath that, there's a trust that we have with our teams that they're meeting with their teams and so forth, which they probably are, but it still doesn't mean that everything goes up in the same way, right? So one time we were having some, I don't know, I had maybe gotten some feedback that people were feeling, and you might have been there at this time actually, but people were feeling that stuff wasn't trickling down, that information wasn't getting down, that we didn't know, people felt like they didn't know everything that was going on in the company or across departmentally. Maybe we had some silos forming, these kinds of things. And so I was like, okay, like, let me just do these. Someone suggested that I do these like town hall meetings with different groups. So I went into different departments without the managers being there, and or if they were there, I think I asked them not to say anything, but I think they weren't there. And I just said, okay, we have an hour together. Like, what do you guys think is working? What do you think is not working? How can we get better? And what was one of the ideas that came out of this was this idea that there is just flat out information that they want to know in a really positive way of exciting things, let's say, that are happening with the company. Now, meanwhile, of course, my defense went up because I'm like, we send out emails once a month with all of this stuff. But of course, people don't read emails like that unless, it has some sort of negative or scary thing in the title. People generally don't read a lot of emails, and we can blame them all we want for that. But the fact of the matter is the company was having some breakdowns because of it, right? So we created, and I thought someone gave me this idea in one of those meetings, which was we should just have a board up by where the lunchroom is, this big board that says, did you know? And so it'd say, did you know ? And then we had underneath it where people would write things that were happening to them. So either it could be that my kid got into this college, or it could be we just got this award for this, or that this facilitator that's out in this particular job got this positive thing happen to them. Whatever it was started to go up on that board, and somebody was responsible to make sure it got changed every week, because if it goes past a week, people don't read on the board, turns out, either. But if you erase it and you change it often, then people will read it. And it was such a simple thing that did you know board became like a real piece of communication. And it just was a dry erase marker on a board outside the lunchroom, So that came from exactly one of those types of meetings that you're talking about. So it can be very popular.
I want to comment on what you just said, because I think that I can see a moment knowing you where, a few leaders come to you and say, oh, Christine, there's a disconnect. And exactly what you said. Oh, we send these emails. What else do you want from me? I can see you in that moment. And I can also see you kind of going home, stewing on it, thinking about it, and finding your authentic version of soliciting that communication from staff. So you getting it in your body and coming back to work and saying, okay, we're going to have a town hall. We're going to do this series of things. And so what I love about you and what I've learned from you is that you're hearing the pulse of what the staff need. You're hearing the pulse of what the organization needs. And then you are thinking through your genuine role in listening to that and changing that. And it's always so thoughtful, and the product is better and genuine, where a lot of leaders just don't have time. Well, I sent the email, they need to read their email. Like you said, we'll spend more energy being stubborn on the fact that the methods of communication that we're using are not working versus trying to find something that works. Same thing with the teens. We have a lot of teens here. Am I literally supposed to abandon email and just text with that population of staff? I might have to, right? That might actually be, me sending a video message of like, what's up, camp counselors? If you want to be present and purposeful with each of these sets of staff that move your organization forward, you just absolutely have to surrender and make it happen.
I love it. You're so right. And that's happening on work sites everywhere. Like if people want to get out to they have a bunch of folks that are on pipelines, let's say. They're doing the same thing, Amanda. They're sending out texts to their teams with videos, with whatever, because they're noticing they're not reading those emails. So what are you going to do? Fight it? Like you can fight on that front, but then on the other front, you're like, what's the most important thing here? I think, well, thank you, first of all, for that, for what you said. I also think one thing that I learned in that process, it's one of the things, I find in this life, you have to learn things over and over and over again. Hopefully you just learn them faster and you go, oh, right, that's the thing I always have to think about. But when I notice that a lot of times I'll think, okay, I'm going to change this or I'm going to fix this. And then I do it and I think, okay, check, done, moving on to the next thing. And one of the recurring themes in my leadership that I have to do is make sure that people also know that I made the change because of their feedback. And it's such a funny thing. Like, why does it matter? Like, so when I put up that did you know board, I had to say, this was one of the things we did as a result of your feedback. And then they go, oh, okay, I'm being listened to. But if I just did that without telling people this is what we did and this is why, you don't get all of the actual feeling of people being heard. And it's remarkable how that little adjustment made a big change in how people felt about things, is letting them know that the change is because of them. That would be one tip that I would have for young leaders.
I was just going to say, I think that that's really important and easy to miss, to your point. I think too, if there's, 1 to 5 staff members in that kind of town hall moment where you feel like what they said really stuck with you, I think looping back and finding them and saying, hey, John, I just want you to know that really sat with me, something that you shared and shaped how we move forward. And so people feel an individual connection to how you've shaped kind of the next chapter with their feedback. Again, it takes so much time, but so important.
It takes time, and it also takes a humility that I'm not always comfortable with. I find that I am sometimes have this, like, it sounds silly, but a little bit of shame that I didn't think about this beforehand, or that really it comes down to like that feeling of not being perfect, or not for people to be unhappy, or for there to be some sort of solution. There's a little bit, I used to feel this little bit of shame. And so for me to be able to just fix it, I felt good about that, as if I didn't have to talk about it again. Like, let's just move on, right? Everybody's happy, go. But I found that important thing was missing, where people would constantly feel not heard. And so once we said these changes are because of you, or this is because of this, then people started to get, oh, okay, because everyone's busy. They don't know that you actually listened to them and did something different, right? And again, this is a very small change, what I'm talking about, but it could be bigger things. But I also know that the same feeling can happen in my relationships. So it could be the same thing with my husband, or if he's upset about the way I've done something or handled something, I may just think in my head, okay, I'm going to fix this. I don't want to upset him, or I don't want to piss him off about this. I'm just going to fix this. But how gracious in a deeper way to be able to say, babe, I heard you and I'm making a different choice on this, or this is why I did this differently this time, is so much more loving. But sometimes I would be a little stingy with that kind of thing, for the same reason of not wanting to seem like I just didn't have my shit together perfectly. And we can do that with our friends too. So all of our relationships, and that's why I love the study of leadership, because it's really about the study of being better in relationship in all parts of our lives,
Yeah, it is absolutely holistic. And I think when you nail it, when you feel like you've got a formula that works personally or professionally, being able to mimic that, it is so similar. I love the word stingy, Christine. I'm using that because I feel the same way. It's like, I'm going to take my right prize quietly and allow you this is more in the husband territory, I guess, is where this is going. But it is absolutely a bridge builder when you can say, yeah, that wasn't who I am. I thought more on that, and I'm going to come to this differently. So much learning there. And our kids too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Our friends, I think my friends and my relatives would all say that you want some straight talk, you find Amanda. And usually that straight talk comes with a lot of love and squeezing and hugs too. Obviously this is all really difficult with husbands, with friends, with coworkers, with your staff, all of it. Again, back in my TLP days, there was a Harvard Business Review article, which is probably, the early 2000s now at this point. So it's over 20 years old. Do you quote things that are over 20 years old on this podcast?
If they're good. I'm over 20 years old.
Yeah. Amen. I think I brought it to a workshop with new managers and said, it was like 93% of people want the feedback you have to give. Not, this high percentage of people absolutely believe there's a correlation between constructive criticism and growth and improvement in their work. And so you've already got a captive audience. If you can get through the beginning stage and the courage and kind of the curating of how the session will go, that's the harder part, right? But the person on the other end of it absolutely wants communication. They want to know where they stand. And it is our responsibility to be present and deliver on that, regardless of how challenging it might feel sometimes.
Yeah. Well, that brings it to this question that I have, because I think people really struggle with handling difficult conversations, and that we feel like, oh, we can communicate really well when it's all positive, but the hard part is when it's going to be sticky, right? And so how do you maintain those strong relationships? Because I know that that's important to you, and that you have always had, in my experience, very strong relationships, both at work and in your personal life. But like, how do you handle having difficult conversations while maintaining those strong relationships and holding yourself accountable to actually having them?
Yeah, I think having structured mechanisms in which you meet with your staff, your direct reports, is really important. I think a lot of people are like, oh, we'll just meet if we need to. That rhythm does not look the same on the team that I directly support. So one of them is monthly, one of them is weekly, one of them is biweekly. Everyone is a little different. The agendas for those, some are very tight, and we know exactly what we're going to talk about. Some of them are come with what you need, and we'll kind of brainstorm together. And each of those are based on really what that employee needs from me during our time. But in every session, you have an opportunity to talk about what's working and talk about what's not. And I think, again, the normalizing of that, like each time we meet, there's going to be some real estate for both of those things. It's just going to be how we operate together. And then I also try to be open to like, hey, that meeting with the coaches, I don't feel like I was effective for you. Give me your feedback on that. And she might say, yeah, actually, there was an idea that you shared that I wish you would have talked to me about first, because then I felt like I was bringing the group back from that moment, right? And so I'm kind of pushing against what she needs, and so both giving the space to unpack things and give the constructive criticism, but also being open to, hey, what about me? Is there something I could have done better for you in that moment? And that's hard. That's hard for us to say, and that's hard for them to respond to also. So again, like,
Did
hey,
she
I also
respond?
want to hear. She sure did, but we're super close after lots and lots of work, right? She did respond. That's what she said, that I created a diversion. Yeah. The other thing too, if you can't wait for the meeting, if it's a monthly situation, pulling someone aside and saying, I have some feedback about what happened on Saturday. Tell me when you have some time to talk about it, so that they then are responsible for coming to you. This is Erica Petrelli all day, all night, right? Tell me when it's a good time. I have some feedback. You tell me when it's a good time for us to discuss it, so that then they're coming in prepared and ready.
And open, more open.
And open.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They've steadied themselves for it, right? And Amanda is referring to Erica Petrelli Bai, who's one of our guests in the Leadership Studio, who used to be Amanda's boss there for a time too.
Listen, what people don't realize about this podcast is that I was raised by you and Erica in a very low digital time, in rooms with boxes of tissues and coaching sessions and all of this. And now the entire country gets access to all of you with these podcasts. I'm literally like walking to work, listening to you and Erica, thinking, this is incredible. Follow this podcast. I am your biggest cheerleader.
There you have it, Amanda. I love it. If only everybody was, that would be awesome. So yeah, let's keep going on this, because I think this idea of like difficult conversations, and I love that tip of like, if you put yourself in asking people for it as well, that then it's going to help create that culture where it goes both ways. I love that. And like, what other advice do you think for people who struggle maybe with delivering constructive feedback? To be honest with you, I get this question all the time. Like, I don't know how to give this constructive feedback. And so they bring so much heaviness to the conversation before it's even started, because it's full of their own nervousness and their own trepidations and their own emotions, that of course it's going to be harder. It's so heavy already.
Yeah. I think this maybe doesn't make people feel better, but I definitely think through the first few steps of the conversation. Like, how am I approaching the topic? What's the opening line? I might script, especially if it's a super challenging one, I might script the very beginning. And then you just have to, really be present, listen to what they're saying, and understand what your objective is. So it has to be, again, that authenticity piece, right? You can't, if they respond with something and then you're on bullet 3 of the points that you really want to make, you're not honoring what they're bringing to the conversation, which I think is so important. And so there has to be some comfortability around here's a clear objective for the meeting. I want to improve their work performance or improve their self-awareness of this thing that they're doing. I'm going to have that on the top of my mind. And then here's how I'm going to open, and then I'm just going to let what happens happen. I think that that's a piece that is really important, because if you overscript, that's going to come off, I think, as a little bit too rehearsed as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I think the other thing too, and this is hard, is you have to believe they can improve. If I am on the path in any of my roles with you here, if I am on the path where I'm not confident this is going to improve, is very challenging to be authentic and to be a kind of a positive growth changer for that person. So going into it with love, going into it with a genuine interest to see this person succeed is huge, because you're in that moment, you're the person that has the most ability besides them, right? To mm-hmm. have a positive impact come from the session.
Yeah. I love that part of what you talk about, really the art of the start, so to speak. And Brene Brown talks about it. She calls it rumble starters, to have those ready. And I think to have those beginnings, that beginning line or something that gets you to that meeting faster than you would normally want to take is super helpful. I think that's a great note for people. I love that you think, a little bit of preparation goes a long way. And I think you're right. I think just preparing for that moment before you go in, centering yourself and seeing, I love that idea of having an objective. Like, what's the objective that I want? Is my intention pure in this, or am I just angry? Am I just wanting to lash out at somebody, or am I really wanting their growth? Is a real check-in point. And if I can't get to that point, it's not time for that feedback. I think
yeah,
that's a really good
but you brought up our girl Brene, and I think the other challenge of that whole mind the gap theory of just, if you wait too long, you've got the Grand Canyon between you and this individual, and now it's really challenging to build a bridge, really challenging to talk about it. It might be something that happened over a month ago, and now all of a sudden we have the courage. It's a recipe for failure. And so, ripping off that Band-Aid and doing it as close to when the incident happened, or when, whatever originated the feedback, I think is really important too.
Yeah, really important. I think that if you can get yourself to do them is also, like I always say, the only way to get better at it is practice. It's like any skill. You're not going to get good at this in your mind, and then someday you're going to wake up and be good at this. It's only by having these conversations over and over and over again that you get better at them. I don't know if any of you out there, I know for you, Amanda, we've had this talk before, but if you've ever had to terminate somebody, right? If you've had to fire somebody, I always say that then you're going to be a better manager going forward, because that moment of firing someone is about one of the worst conversations that you have to ever have at work. So then you go, oh, I don't want to have this conversation that many more times. I better start talking to people about their issues way early in that process.
Absolutely. Apology. I'm having a memory of the apology too, the transparency. This isn't a termination. Another coaching you gave me. We role played some tricky terminations in 2006, 7, 8, whatever. There was a good amount of layoffs then. Do you remember that? And I was so vulnerable. I am so vulnerable. You reminded me, it's my superpower and my kryptonite all at the same time. And so your ability too to enter one of those sessions and say, this is really hard. I'm having a hard time with this, but you're worth it. And I really want to find an effective way to give you this feedback so that you can grow from this. It doesn't always work, and you might not always feel it authentically, but the sessions where I've had a really hard time, or I'm not feeling super confident with the rumble start or the, objective, I might just own it too and say, this is challenging. But if we can spend a half an hour talking through this, I think we're both going to be better for it. I think that can be disarming to the colleague you're working with as well.
Yeah, it comes back to that piece of authenticity, right? And trust, so that they go, oh, okay, I'm dealing with a person here, not just my boss or not just a colleague, but a real human. And then on a strategic level, it is disarming, right? It's just like martial arts, right? When you kind of don't fight against it, but you kind of give in a little bit, it helps strategically.
Listen, there's a reason we both went to school for theater,
That's true.
I don't mean that in a disingenuous way. I mean that in, our ability to tailor the message based on who's in front of you. What kind of style does this session need? What kind of, emotions do I need to evoke so that this person feels comfortable? It's really just being able to tap into that.
Mm-hmm. It's so true. This is very off topic, but I'm just going to go there. There was another moment that I had, like what you just said, of, I went to school for theater. I don't think it was so long ago at this point. I don't think about it often, but I was talking to my father the other day, who is very, very ill, and he has cancer. And he was talking about how he also has a problem with his lungs, and he's having trouble, he's at almost 78 in a week. And he was saying that he has to learn how to breathe. He said, here I am, 78 years old. I've run businesses. He used to be an athlete. He played at the Naval Academy. He played professional tennis for a while. He's like, and I've never actually learned how to breathe. And now I'm in breath classes so that I can walk up the stairs properly. And Christine, turns out there's like this whole way to breathe. And as he's describing it to me, I said, yeah, Dad, that's why you paid for theater, why you paid for college for me, because basically I had whole classes in breath work. And he's like, oh, that's, him who thought he sent me to trade school now is like, oh, okay, I see the value. Finally. So anyway, there's a lot that comes from us theater students that helps throughout life, including your breath, including how to relate to different people, including how to access your vulnerability or your authenticity, hopefully easier. So I always think there's theater hires are always good hires out there, no matter what the business, people. Generally, they need work. So, we're kind of, I could talk to you forever, but what do you think are some daily habits or practices that you think have either improved your communication as a leader, or you've seen in other folks that you're like, this is something that can be really helpful to folks?
I definitely mentioned before having a set structure, whatever that structure is, to have consistent dialogue and opportunities to share expectations and talk about how things are going. I think that's really, really important. And perhaps too, with those that don't report to you. So in cases like you, where you're the CEO of a larger entity, having a town hall mechanism, whatever that is, for people to know where they can share their voice. This is small, but something I've been working on. And I think we also undervalue is, as I work in a Victorian mansion, which is really funny because everybody's in bedrooms, but we're all here. And so we don't use any sort of chat function. A lot of it is still very much email. And so I've gotten better at understanding the efficiency of that. And so things like, hey, we need to send this out this week. Here's an idea, what it could look like. I'm thinking like in the marketing, one of our marketing staff is new, let me know if this is something that can happen by Wednesday. And if you have any questions, right? Where that now she understands, okay, here's the content. Let me take a look at that. Wednesday is doable. And we're both moving forward together in 2 emails instead of 7. She might come down and talk to me, but I think sometimes you can get trapped in a flowery, friendly email that feels warm and miss the boat in some of those deliverables that can just help everyone be clear on the expectations and the task and the ability to move forward. So I think that that's something I've been getting much better at. And then, I often still really believe in playing the synthesizer. So if we have a meeting that is cross-departmental, but we're all working on the Martin Luther King Day event together, being able to be in a room, connect all the dots, have everyone understand, but then recap that. A lot of people don't take the time for that. It becomes a written digital reference to this is who's doing each thing. Sometimes in more sophisticated settings, there's a project management software or whatever people are using. But those are little exercise habits I think that a lot of people are skipping. And then we spend a lot of time re-clarifying, re-communicating, or having a session, to the essence of this conversation, about why you didn't accomplish it in the first place. And so putting a lot of responsibility on you to be a clear communicator and how that translates to everything, the job, the goal, the expectations, the deadline, all of it.
I love it. So are you saying that you, as the executive, put that together?
It depends on that. So Martin Luther King is a great example because it doesn't live with one department. It's something we all execute together. Okay. So in that kind of moment, I might be the beginning of, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. Here's how each department will connect. And then I'll pass it to marketing or community engagement to take it from there. But those important moments to lend your voice why are we all doing this and what is everyone's role in this process, I think can be easily missed as we speed through our days.
You become the synthesizer of all of those ideas you're saying in all those departments. And then you're putting that out like on a board. Are you emailing it? Like or you say sometimes it's project management software but something where people know what deadlines are, what they've committed to, something like that.
Yeah, in this scenario, I would say it's email. But your question is reminding me too. I think the other important piece of this is when I don't own the communication, when the communication is not my responsibility, and how comfortable or uncomfortable I am with that. And so, back to your reference, is it most effective that you're the town hall lead or someone else leading and you're in the room listening? And, there's just so many ways to lean in and lean out of this. But I think being able to really read the room and see where you are needed and where you are not, so that they can move fast. Let your fast horses run, Christine Courtney.
Yes. I do say that. Yes. Yeah, very true. And I love what you said about when you give them the assignment, that you're also saying, can this be done by Wednesday or whatever whatever the deadline is, I think is really a great tip, because it's just stops, like you said, about 10 emails or assumptions that you have that this is going to be done. And they may be seeing this as like, oh, this is a big thing, but I have so many competing priorities. I'm not sure where this lands in my priority list. And instead of coming back to you and saying, hey, when do you need this by, which would be helpful if you're the person who gets an email like that, but instead of that having to even happen, you've put it out there so that they can either come back and be like, well, I don't know. One thing that I had, Tatiana Dominguez, who's one of our producers, who's worked with us for a long time, as you know, one of the things that she does for me is when I come to her with like some, cockamamie idea that to do, that she has to figure out how to do it. Sometimes when I can see that it's overwhelming, or like she'll look at me and go, okay, sure. What would you like not to happen in order for this to happen? And then it kind of stops me and I'm like, what? And she's like, well, I just want to show you the other things that I'm working on and it's totally fine. But just which thing should I just put on hold? And then I sometimes go, whoa, wait. And I stop myself and go, oh, you're right. Okay, well, what do you think? And then we can have a real, negotiation over where things could happen. But, me, I'm just like kind of going through, thinking of these ideas, hoping that it happens, not realizing all the things that are on her plate. And so that's a really good I found a really helpful communication style that she used to manage up with me that I often share with people. Like sometimes, as the boss, they don't get it. And people think we have all of our mind organized and together. And that's not always the case. We don't know what everybody's doing.
Well, and you don't want to stop giving the ideas too. So it's I think that's an important role, to light people up and shake things up and keep things fresh. And so knowing Tatiana, knowing what, Blanca's style or Tom's style or, what they each need to be able to hear your idea and move it forward is another piece too of just that owner's manual idea. We've been talking about it a lot here as the owner's manual with these newbies. It's like, what is your style and how do I best support that style? I can see that conversation happening with you and Tatiana.
I know. Well, and the funny thing is that I get very, I think it's my Generation X mentality. I mean, you're a millennial, so maybe you'll feel differently.
Me.
I don't know.
I am on the cusp of X. I am the superstar epicenter right now, right? Where I can totally live in X. I can embrace the boomers. I can tolerate the millennials. I am bridging and loving it.
Full of humble pie. Yes. You're a millennial. That answer was so millennial. But anyway, I get sometimes upset when I hear a lot of advice for young people, especially of just say no, or a lot to women, like just say no to in a work, not in any other context, but like in work, like it's time for you to say no to that. You take on too much responsibility. And I'm like, that is such bad advice, because nobody likes that person at work that's like, can you do this? No. You're going to pay me more? What are you going to do? No. Instead, what Tatiana did for me in that moment was not her saying no, but a way of asserting herself of like, I want to be the person that can make yes happen, but it's I'm not sure how to do that this way, which is an indicator of me of like, okay, I need to figure out what this is, because too many yeses mean nothing's happening, right? Nothing's happening well anyway. And so, but she's not saying no to me, like, no, that can't happen, and shutting it down, because that means communication stops. And when communication stops, guess what the boss is going to do? They're going to go somewhere else, and they're going to give that idea to somebody else. And that person may have the guts to communicate in a way that says, how can we make this happen? And so if, both parties are responsible and have can make a relationship better. It's not just about the person that holds most of the power, although it's helpful if that person is learning and getting better, right? Because it's our responsibility. If we have, I always think whoever has the bigger paycheck, we better be earning it. And that means by leading that communication.
And responsibility is such an important word that, people come to work. We are responsible for the environment that they come to work in. We spend more time at work than we do often with our loved ones. And so the vulnerability to dig into some of this as leaders is just so important, especially in today's day with all these generations, to your point, in the workplace.
I love it. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll definitely have you back if you'll have us, because this communication series is really important. And you do have a lot of fresh, good advice for everybody. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Christine.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. I'd like to give a special shout out to our podcast producer, Richard Francisco. Check out our notes for any details. And if you get anything out of this, please follow us. And if you enjoy it, please take a moment to rate us or write a comment. It will mean the world to us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you just can't get enough, follow me on TikTok and check out tlpnyc.com/podcast for more information.